Alright, so this is a video I've been looking forward to doing for quite a while. I actually planned to put this review together about 4 weeks ago, but I was actually in the process of putting this review together and was contacted by Arken. They wanted to send me a patch for my 1 mile or my 1.5 mile cold bore shot with the Arken SH4 Gen 2 on my 7 SOM here. And also wanted me to talk about the Arken Cold Bore Challenge, what it is, how you guys can get involved with my review. So that's what we're going to do. So if you guys are interested in the Arken Cold Bore Challenge, what it is, how you can get involved, and how you can get your patches for your cold bore shots, stay tuned towards the end of this video and we'll talk all about the Arken Cold Bore Challenge. But I've been looking forward to getting into the full review of the SH4 Gen 2. So the Arken SH4 Gen 2. So first off, Arken has done something here that I think, now this is not something they've told me, but I did a video, it's been, at this point it's probably been 6 months or better now, where I talked about scope quality, Japanese, Chinese manufacturers, and the markup on scope. So the amount it costs for manufacturing, for the people that are selling us the scopes to buy the scopes versus the amount that they're selling it to us for. There's a huge markup on most of your scopes, even your budget optics. And I said in that video, in my personal opinion, if a company were to go to one of these Japanese or Chinese manufacturers, get all of the best options that you can possibly get, and bring it to the consumer at a much lower markup, they may not make as much off each scope, but they would certainly sell a whole lot more scopes. And in my personal opinion, like I said, without Arken telling me this, I think that's what's going on and why there's been such a long wait on all of Arken's scopes, is because they're bringing us a top quality. Now this is a Chinese scope, but this was built with all Arken's input. Arken gives all their input on every piece of the scope, and it is assembled in China with all of the top components. So let's get into what those components are. So, and also their markup obviously is nowhere near what most of these other companies are bringing their markup to. So really want to point them out and give them kudos for that, because they're doing something that I think has been needed to be done for quite some time. So the internals, the nuts and bolts of this thing. So this thing is a 34mm tube. So first off, 34mm tube, you guys know for me, I like to shoot crazy distances. So that 34mm tube allows a lot of adjustment, internal adjustment, which we'll talk about more here in a minute. So 34mm tube right off the bat is a big selling point. 50mm objective, this thing is 36.6 ounces. It is 14.1 inches long. It has a 3.5-inch eye relief. Now, as you guys know, I've talked about in the past, I usually prefer a 4-inch eye relief, but that 3.5 inches is plenty to where you are not going to get scope bit if you put this on a heavy recoiling rifle or something like that. As well as I've actually noticed that I think I actually am able to set back. I like just a 4-inch or so eye relief because it feels a little bit more comfortable to me, the way I set my rifles up. But I've had no issues with this 3.5-inch, and I actually think I've been able to bring my eye back a little bit further than that 3.5 inches and still have plenty of a full scope picture. So another big part of this is the steel internals. So this thing has actual steel internals. So almost every other scope, if not every other scope you see at this price point, has brass internals. This thing has steel internals like you see on a lot of your higher end optics. So that is another big, right off the bat, you feel like you see those steel internals and you know that it's solid, and the guts of this thing are much more solid than something that's built with brass internals. So these things are available in mil or MOA, 6 to 24 power. You can also get them in a 4 to 16 power as well. I'm not sure if the weight and everything is the same on the 4 to 16. This is the 6 to 24 model. This thing does have a zero stop, built-in zero stop, and I will say, kudos to Arken. This is probably the easiest zero stop I've ever seen. I know they do have patent pending, or at least it says so on their website, on this zero stop, but it is just an extremely intuitive zero stop. The one thing I will say about the zero stop that I would actually, some would prefer something slightly different, is I tend to like to set my zero stops a couple mils or a couple minutes of angle past zero so that I can dial up if I ever need to. But it's not a big deal. There's plenty of reticle above the zero with your VPR reticle, which we'll talk more about again here in a second. So it has an illuminated reticle. They all come in red. Parallax from 25 to infinity. And one of the things I want to say about the Parallax, I've noticed that the Parallax is really close. Now, obviously, I have a full video on Parallax. If you're confused about what we're talking about Parallax, go back and check that video out. It will explain everything you need to know. But the Parallax on this thing the numbers are pretty close to where they actually line up downrange. Now, I know most of the time we don't use our parallax numbers, but I like to have those reference points. I know a lot of people don't. A lot of people say they get in the way, but for me personally, I like to have that reference point so I can quickly get to where I need to go and then fine tune it. And I've noticed that these numbers are pretty close, at least on my particular example. Glass quality, this thing has top quality Chinese glass. It is Chinese glass, but it is HD glass, and I will go ahead and say that the glass in this Arken now, yes, it is Chinese glass. You are not going to get the absolute same clarity that you're going to get out of Japanese glass or even German glass or shot glass or any of the other really high-end glass. But Chinese glass has come so far in the last 10 years that people have a hard time admitting that it's very close to your Japanese glass. And the examples in this Arken are not far off. Yes, on the higher powers, when you crank it all the way up to 24, I will say I do notice a little bit of your chromatic aberration around the edges, but that's only on the absolute max power, and it's not such an amount that it's distracting. So glass quality in this is as good as you're going to see from any Chinese optic out there, period. Tracking test. So I did a full tracking test on this. Another thing, this thing is a $450 scope. I don't think I've mentioned that yet. The price point on this thing is $450. And this thing tracked, we did the full tracking test on it, 10 mil tracking. It tracked 99.5 to 100%. And in that tracking test, one of the other things I want to say is this thing has very positive tactile turrets now, or clicks in the turrets. Now, I hate it when people say that in scope reviews, but it's absolutely true with this. So much so to the point that when I do that tracking test, when I do tracking tests, the way that I do them is I put this in a lead sled. I clamp the lead sled down, I clamp the rifle down, I put the camera on the optic, we line it up with our true stick downrange, and then we start dialing. Every time I would click, you would see the rifle jump all over the place, clamped in, everything tight, and you would see it jump all over the place and then come back to center, obviously, because these turrets are just so tactile. So that is, a lot of people like to know that, and they are very tactile. And I will say one of the things that I like is they're very precise. They line up exactly to the number that they're supposed to every time without exception. The elevation adjustment in this thing. So like I said, 34 millimeter tube allows for a ton of elevation adjustment. So this thing has, now by the numbers, by their specs, 108.8 minutes or 32 mils of elevation. I will say that my particular example here, I was able to get 34.2 mils total elevation out of this scope. Now, I don't recommend, and I'm sure Arken doesn't either, taking it past that 32 mil mark, but I do want to note that it was available. Now, one of the things that does cost you, though, with all that extra elevation adjustment, is it's going to cost you in the amount of windage that you're able to dial. And the reason it is because of the way the erectors are built. If you get to where you're dialed all the way up and you start dialing your windage over, you'll lose elevation one way or the other. So that is, in my personal opinion, I think that's why there is such a small amount of windage adjustment. So this is absolutely a fantastic long-range scope. One of the things I want to say is, you guys have seen me use this a few times for ELR shots, and this is probably not, depending on your setup, depending on the way that I'm using it, probably not absolutely the best for some of those shots that I'm doing. Now, what I've done is I've kind of waited till the wind was in the right direction to make those shots, because I only have 5 mils. You only have 10 mils of total windage adjustment. I noticed that there was 11 in this windage adjustment, but that's all the total windage adjustment. So just 5 mils one way or the other. So when I'm shooting those ELR shots, it doesn't take a lot of wind to move that bullet 5 mils, not a lot at all. So that is one thing that I've had to contend to getting those ELR shots done with the Arken, is the smaller amount of windage. But if you're shooting PRS, if you're shooting to 1,000 yards or 1,200 yards, and those are your regular distance of shots, you are not going to, you will be hard pressed to run out of windage in your turret. And then on top of that, you have 5 mils or more on each side in the reticle. So that is another big plus to this, is all your elevation adjustment, but it does cost you a little bit in your windage department. And depending on the distances you're shooting, the type of wind you're shooting in, that may be an issue for you. So the reticle in this thing has the VPR reticle. It is available in mil or MOA. This reticle is great for some things, in my personal opinion, and not great for some others. So what is it awesome for? It is fantastic as a long-range scope. So it has a very fine reticle. It has a lot of information. It's got the Christmas tree with plenty of data points, plenty of data points everywhere you need them to be. But they are not so thick that the subtensions on this thing are not so thick that when you have it magnified all the way that they get in the way of anything, which I really like. But what that costs you is when you dial the magnification down, you will notice that sometimes the reticle is somewhat harder to find. Now that if you're hunting, this may not be the perfect optic for you. First off, you're only able to go down to 6 power, and then on that 6 power, the reticle is very small. So if you don't have a lot of light, you may have a hard time finding that reticle. So that is one thing I've noticed, is all the way down on the lower power magnifications, the reticle is very small. Now it's bigger than it was in the EP4. I've looked through several of those, but it is still, in my personal opinion, small on the 6 power. But overall, fantastic for the long range. If you're using this for long range shooting, the reticle anywhere other than that all the way down is going to be plenty big enough. And what I really like about it is their center dot aiming point. They give you a nice, noticeable center dot aiming point that is not too big. And what that allows you to do is be very precise with your point of aim. Now, I shot an F-class match with this and had absolutely no problem. Probably the only guy there shooting a mil scope, I'm sure. But I had absolutely no problem whatsoever dialing in on those and making very precise shots, and scored as well as I would have expected to first run out, first of the year. So really happy with that, and we'll shoot more matches with this scope. I don't plan to take this scope off the rest of this year, so I've only shot one match this year. It's been pretty pathetic. I've been very busy. I've got a new kid on the way, which I don't think I've mentioned, as well as working a ton of overtime and a million other things. So I've been very busy, but some of my overtime slowing down, so I do plan to hit some more matches here, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. So if you're looking for a long-range scope that is going to give you everything you need, in my personal opinion, everything you need to get into long range and last you a long time, because the thing seems absolutely solid, and I'm pretty rough on things, I think the Arken SH4 is an absolute steal at $450. So let's talk about the Arken Cold Bore Challenge. So like I said, Arken contacted me right before I put this review together and asked me if they could send me a patch for my 1.5 mile cold bore shot that they saw, which I absolutely said yes. And they said, also, will you talk about the Cold Bore Challenge, what it is? So they went ahead and sent me these other two as well. Now, I will say right off the bat, I don't deserve these. Now, the way this challenge works is they want you to do a video. So if you can do a video of yourself shooting a 1 minute of angle target at 500, 1,000, or 1 mile, they will send you a patch for those distances. So you do the video, post it up on the Arken's Facebook page, and they will send you a patch for the Arken Cold Bore Challenge for whatever distance you put a video up of a cold bore shot. Now, what is a cold bore shot? That means your first shot of the day. The rifle is cold, you lay down behind it, you dial up, and you put a round on the plate, or inside your 1 minute of angle. And you do that and post up the videos on the Arken Facebook page, and they will send you a patch for 500, 1,000, or 1 mile. Now, you may think, oh, 500, 1,000, that's not really hard. Go out and try it. Cold bore shots at 1,000 yards on a 1 MOA target, it's not an easy thing. So I plan to, like I said, I don't deserve these two yet. This one, the 1 mile one, I'll go ahead and claim ownership of that one. But I plan to do a video where I earn my 500 and 1,000. So be on the lookout for that. Be more videos with the Arken SH4 Gen 2. Like I said, I plan to leave this thing on the rifle for the foreseeable future. I've been having a really good time with it. So, hope you guys enjoy this. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.